call to order this motion of the Attleboro School Committee. Will you please rise and join the committee in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I am giving notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. And at this time, we're going to move right to open forum. Open forum, this is a time when members of the public may address the school committee. Open forum is not a time for the committee members to engage in dialogue with members of the public. Guidelines for open forum are available to you up at the podium. Please know that we are interested in what you have to say, but we cannot respond without the background information on your issue. Is there anyone wishing to speak at open forum? Okay, we have nobody wishing to speak at open forum, so we're going to close open forum. And we're going to move on to acceptance of minutes from September 9, 2013.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We have an approval of minutes from September 23rd, 2013.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained?
Abstain.
Abstained?
Yes.
We have two abstains, Ms. Furtado and Ms. Crowe. Okay, before I move on to the consent agenda, I would like to welcome our new student representative to the Attleboro School Committee, Mr. Max Lancaster. Max, thank you very much. And if you'd like to say a couple words to the committee, we definitely want to keep you involved through the year. And you, as a member, have a right to speak on any issue in front of the school committee. I just ask you to raise your hand, be acknowledged, and join the discussion. So, Max, a couple words, please.
Thank you. I'd just like to note that I'm going to be sharing this position with another member of the student body, Brandon Clark. He'll be here next meeting. So we'll be doing sort of a rotation, if you will. So Brandon will be here to the next meeting. So, but thank you, Mr. Tyler.
Well, thank you very much, Max. And again, thank you for joining us. We truly appreciate it. Okay, moving on to consent agenda. We have a motion to accept the donation of $1,000 from an anonymous donor to the Attleboro Evening Diploma Program at Attleboro High School.
So moved.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We have a motion to accept the donation of $100 from the Attleboro War Veterans to the Music Department / Marching Band to be deposited in the gifts donations line at Attleboro High School.
So moved.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We have a motion to accept the donation of $425.35 from the Target Take Charge of Education program to be deposited in the gifts donations line at Hill Roberts Elementary School.
So moved.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We have a motion to accept the donation of $277.37 from the Target Take Charge of Education program to be deposited in the gift donations line at Coelho Middle School.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We have a motion to accept the donation of $208.59 from the Target Take Charge of Education program to be deposited in the gift donations lines at Wamsutta Middle School.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We have a motion to accept the donation of $5,000 from Bank of America Matching Gift Program in partnership with the Alan Shawn Feinstein Foundation to be deposited in the gift donations line at Studley Elementary School.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? I would just like to add that this has been a great partnership, especially for the Studley schools and all the other schools that are working underneath the Feinstein Foundation. They're very generous, and we're very happy to be partners with them.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Pursuant to Mass General Law 53A and a half, a motion to accept and forward to the City Council for approval the following tangible property items: one office desk, one 3-drawer file cabinet, one credenza, thank you, with a true door file cabinet, one desk shell, and 2 Hewlett Packard flat screen monitors from the Edward Jones Company with an estimated value of $2,725.
So moved.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. One Kimosetter Model 340 computer plate system from David Buttery of Minutemen Press in Johnston, Rhode Island, estimated value of $1,500.
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We have a motion to clear the following obsolete items as surplus. 1 HP plotter, 1 Cal-Comp plotter, 1 Scorbot Robotic Arm, 1 Panasonic Printer, 1 United Circle, 1 Packard Bell 12-inch monitor, 1 Isel-Auto CNC machine, 5 Rhino Robotic Arms, 1 Acer CPU, 1 Panasonic CPU, 3 Aspect Epson CPUs, 2 Mini Micro 12-inch monitors, 1 Gold Start 12-inch monitor, 1 Kinetic 12-inch monitor, and 1 Panasonic 12-inch monitor.
So moved.
Discussion?
I just had a quick question about the plotters. Did you guys get new plotters, or do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. Did we get a new plotter? Does anybody know?
Tom?
The answer is I don't know, but I'll find out for you.
Okay.
Yes.
Because if we're in the market for a plotter, that'd be good to know about.
I'll check.
Okay, thank you.
This is equipment that in fact has been hanging around that is in fact obsolete at this particular
It's
time.
been sitting in a corner somewhere. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
I just
More
wanted to.
discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We have a motion to approve the field study proposal from Attleboro High School for the 2014 Annual Leadership Conference on March 5th through March 7th, 2014 at the Hannes Resort and Conference Center for 20 grade 9 through 12 students.
So moved.
Discussion? I just wish them the best of luck in this. So,
Is this
Dave?
the leadership conference in Hyannis?
Yes.
Is that correct, Mr. Lancaster? Are you
MASC.
attending that leadership conference?
I won't be, no.
You won't be, but you did in the past,
Past
correct?
3 years, yeah.
Okay. It is an excellent conference. It's one that the Attleboro's participated in for approximately the past 15 years, and I think that if the student leaders would want to come in and present to the committee some of the tangible skills that they've acquired down in Hyannis, I think that we would benefit from that. So Max, if you could pass it on to the student leadership.
Right, and David, I think that last year, Attleboro was got an award, the first place award for their leadership team at these conferences, and that should be recognized.
Yeah, we
for the hard work
won
you guys do.
what's called the Gold Book of Excellence Award. And, I mean, apart from that, we won the Trivia First Place Award there, so that was a big deal.
Hopefully we can repeat.
Right, hopefully. I mean, it's expected, but, yeah.
It's
It's a
expected.
great experience.
That's awesome, actually. You know, the state of Massachusetts is finding out what we knew a long time ago. We have a lot of great students here at Attleboro High School that really put in the time and effort to represent Attleboro School. Truly appreciate them. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. On to new business. We have a 2013 assessment results and accountability determinations, and that presentation will be done by Mr. Kenneth, Sheehan, our superintendent of schools, Dave Sawyer, our assistant superintendent of schools, and Michelle Roy, our data and accountability coordinator.
Good evening, members of the committee. My pleasure to present the 2013 MCAS results. We could never analyze the data as quickly as our data professional, Michelle Roy. She does a phenomenal job, but prior to going through and reviewing the data with you, that you certainly will understand this data, because at times it can be overwhelmingly complicated, and some of the things, in fact, we haven't even disaggregated some of the data ourselves that go deeper into what we want to do within our schools. So if you can see, the goals for tonight, in fact, are to provide an overview of the 2013 MCAS data and what the accountability results are for the Attleboro Public Schools. We do want to share the progress made by the district in all of its schools. And more importantly, we want to discuss the results of the district and school improvement strategies. It's not enough to look at what we've done over the last 2 or 3 years, or what we've done currently. If you don't stay ahead of the curve, you in fact will be buried by it. So we seek to improve in every school, in every subject, in curriculum endeavor that in fact is measured by MCAS. At the same time, it's not enough just to look at reading and writing in mathematics. Our students need to improve, and we're going to provide the strategies necessary for them to improve in the other curriculum areas as well. So it's not just about scores and test data that are measured by the state. We need to produce students that are well-rounded in a variety of different measures, including those subjects that are not evaluated through the MCAS data. As you can see, this is how Attleboro students are doing in English language arts, reading and writing in the proficiency levels. As you see the grid, we look at it in a 5-year period of time from 2009 to 2013. It's been pretty flat. The bottom line for this slide, in fact, is that Attleboro continues to outscore the rest of the state as an entire school district in English language arts, meaning reading and writing. Michelle, you want to interpret this slide for the committee, please?
All right, this slide also looks at proficiency, but it looks in comparison to two different things. One comparison to how it's done last year, and one compared to the state. So, for example, if you look at grade 3, Attleboro had 62% proficiency on the grade 3 assessment. That was a 0% change from last year. And the state was 57% proficient. That was a 4% decline. So we remain the same. The state declined. We are 5 percentage points higher than the state. The middle number is the student growth, and that compares students to their cohort, with students who scored like them previously. So if we're looking at grade 6, 53 points on the student growth percentile means that they fall between 40 and 60, which is typical growing like students in their same cohort the previous 2 years, if there were previous 2 years of data. So if you look down, anything that's in yellow for the student growth would mean that we fell below the 40, which means we were lower growing compared to students like us across the state. And anything in yellow on the mass difference was where we were below the state as far as percent proficient. Okay? So if we look at this slide, one thing that we would be delving deeper into would be the grade 5 ELA scores, because it's below the state and it's lower growing.
And at the same time, you look at grade 4, and we look at the 65, or the 62% in comparison to the states of 53%, and you have a +9. In other words, Attleboro is considerably doing better than the rest of the state in grade 4 students. So conversely, you want to take a look at, okay, so what are we doing in grade 4? What are those best practices that teachers are in fact employing with their students that would give us the results that's 9 percentage points higher than the rest of the state? What are those practices in the classroom, in fact, that maybe we can carry on or look at that we're doing differently in grade 5? It's one of the pieces. So you compare some of the negative pieces with some of the positive pieces, and you subtract or you get out of those exactly what is intended. And that is always looking at the improvement piece. How are we going to get our students to improve? Where are those areas that we need to work on? And how do we find the people necessary by which to look at those improvements as far as best practices, teaching practices? So we're looking at how students are doing in mathematics. And once again, we see a 5-year group of scores. And we looked at even starting in 2009, where Attleboro, in fact, was doing about the same as the rest of the state. And then as you go into 2010, 11, and 12. In fact, what's really impressive with this slide is that you continue to see the growth in 2010, 2011, 2012. Although it's small, they still are 2 percentage points. So in 2009 to 2010, you had a 6% jump in that with those students, and you continue to grow 2% each and every year. The state would wish it had done the same. So the differential between grade 2012 and 2013, although it is 6%, the state increased 2%, but so didn't we. So we still have a differential of 6% in comparison to the rest of the state. Michelle, you or David want to do this one? Michelle?
This one's like the last one that Michelle explained.
So again, we look at this in two ways. We look at proficiency for Attleboro compared to its previous year, which would be in parentheses. If it's a plus, it shows us a gain. If it's a minus, it shows us a drop. We look at how the state did. So did the state go up and we go up? Did we go up and the state go down? So that gives us a little leverage of how to place our improvement. And then the middle, the student growth, again, we're looking for a target between 40 and 60 is typical. Anything below that is low, and anything above that is high. So you can see one area that we talked about last year, the grade 3 math, where we took a large dip. We've been able to recover that in our realignment and moving forward toward the new state standards. We see a small dip in grade 7, 10 percentage points. That it had an increase last year, and that is a grade level that we're looking at in reference to the level of rigor and whether it meets the level of rigor required with the new state standards. And then a couple areas that we would flag. We're still looking at grade 10 math. I know last year they instituted their full year of geometry. So the group that we have this year will be the first group that we have with a full year of algebra and a full year of geometry. So we'll be looking at those results and how those changes impact that in grade 10. And we see some strong differentials between the state and double digits in math, which tells us we're doing a nice job on keeping up with the level of rigor of the new requirements.
And a lot of times when you're looking at, for example, the grade 10 scores, as Michelle said, when you look at curriculum areas, you look at geometry versus algebra, a lot of times when the subject is taught and to what degree it is taught has significance as far as playing a role in how children will score. So sometimes it's about scope and sequence, when curricula is offered and when students are taking it, as to what the influence of that score will be taking MCAS testing. So in fact, they've now changed the curriculum offering, and so I think you will probably see a difference in some of the results going into 10th grade for next year, for our next year's 10th graders. I think Michelle brings up a very good point about what is the differential. All kids take the same test, and so the differential in the test in comparison to the state is most important, because we're now viewed in the same light as everybody else in the state. So when our 8th grade is, in fact, 15 percentage points above the rest of the state, that's significant. That also should play a major role with that cohort of students 2 years from now, when in fact they take the POC and see what is the comparison with the rest of the state then. So even though we're moving to a POC test, we'll be able to look at POC in comparison to the rest of the state, just as MCAS has been compared to the rest of the state now.
And we talked quite a bit about that last year, because that was that movement where they had to do a half a year of grade 8 math and a full year of algebra. So you can tell we did a nice job with that, I would say, from that data.
I just got a quick question on that. There seems to be a very significant drop-off between 8 and 10. So what's happening in the 9th grade? What are the tangibles that happen with a freshman? It seems like a very significant drop-off. We have a plus 15 in 8th grade, and yet when they're in 10th grade, where it's actually a graduation requirement to pass mathematics, we have a negative 4. So, I mean, what are some of the things that contribute to that? I mean...
Well, one thing, the adjustment that they made, I would say, is now they're going to have a full year of algebra and a full year of geometry, which just alone time on learning, the amount of hours that they're getting is significantly impacted. The second thing you have to look at is the requirement of the new Common Core. So is the level of questioning deep enough to meet the new requirements? So is it strictly skill-based, or are they moving toward, adjusting to the analysis and the compare and contrast kind of level? So that really needs to be reviewed with the release of the questions. So, we are delving into that. So, but just the time on learning alone is I would predict a significant impact. They've also adjusted with small learning communities for those students that are struggled, and this is their second year, going into their third year now, where they've got, identified those students at risk through early warning indicators that we now have. So those students are being targeted and assisted earlier, which is helpful.
And I look at the results, to answer your question in part, I look at some of the results, especially in that 10th grade area, which is unbelievable when the state is 82% and they're a +2. At 80%, in fact, is a large number for the rest of the state. So it's a way for us to look at, okay, what are neighboring communities doing in grade 10, in grade 9 and grade 10 in preparation for MCAS that maybe we're not doing, or maybe it is a scope and sequence problem, or maybe it's a particular way by which we're teaching some form of the math subjects, but it is something that really draws our attention to it. Bill?
I had a similar thought when I was reviewing the slide, and then I started backing up a little bit and looking at the trend. And if you start at grade 7 and you look at our 54, our 69, our 76, I mean, that's nice, steady, significant increase in progress. And in the same time, you look at the state, the 52, the 54, and then the sudden jump to 80. My first thought was the 80 could be wrong, because it's an incredible jump in the course of 1 year for such a large body of individuals to have made. I'm sure they've double-checked it, so I don't mean to imply that there's something wrong with the number, but I think it's important to look at. Maybe there are some things that, yes, we need to do, and it sounds like that's already in place. But I also think that it's important to realize, when you look at the trend that we've had over the last, obviously, 3 years in the 7th and 8th and going into the 10th grade, it's definitely a program that's working relatively well. And obviously, there's maybe a tweak to make, but some people doing some really good things there.
Yeah, and like everything, you just can't rest. You can't rest on your laurels. Although you're increasing, you always have to seek to improve. You always have to seek better ways to improve every single child.
Absolutely.
So you've got to divide this and disaggregate the data, which some students are scoring in some of the individual groups of students, how they score in comparison to others, what is their math background coming into the school in comparison to others. So there's a lot of things that are disaggregated from the data instead of looking at 76% or 80%. A lot goes into who are the people, who are those teachers who are teaching those students, what population are they coming from who are doing really, really well, and what other populations are not doing as well as we expect.
The other thing I would point out is that the 76% proficiency rate this year matches a 76% proficiency rate last year. So it's not like the math scores went down or are slipping. The level of achievement has stayed the same. Now, of course, we'd like to see growth, and that's something that we have to look into, why we didn't get more growth. But they're holding their achievement levels. Whereas, like in 8th grade this year, we had an increase of 8 points, which is an extremely significant increase. So if you think back to the 10th graders when they were 8th graders, if we're looking at 8-point gains this year, and you assume that there's been because all the graphs are, moderate change, how far behind were these 10th graders when they were in 8th grade?
Right.
Which is part of the story as to why they're a little bit behind now.
Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. I was going to try to save this question to the end, but I think it's somewhat in line with what we're discussing right now. And I guess my question is, if there's a dramatic change in the state averages, which based on the trends that we looked at, there generally doesn't seem to have been in any areas, that the state has stayed consistent, and that is relatively flat. And if the 10th grade math state averages are significantly higher than what's considered proficient at other grade levels and in other areas, does that beg the question, not whether or not the test was corrected incorrectly, but is there a question as to whether or not the control sample is what the state wants it to be? In other words, is there some question as to whether or not the state standards have kept pace with regard to 10th grade math? Or is that just...
They're different tests, testing different things. And so each test has its own level of proficiency, which no one can really know whether one proficient on one test is the same as proficient on another test, which is why you're not really supposed to compare.
What I just compared?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, well, I mean, but it does seem, I mean, the 80% seem to sort of catch all of our eye, and I'm just curious, because my last question, when we get to that, will be a request to sort of explain to the community what purpose these numbers serve, because I think that oftentimes there seems to be some misperceptions as to exactly what value we can extract from looking at these, and what value educators can extract and what value community members can extract.
I mean, on a certain level, the state gets to set what proficient is.
Yep.
And it does so based on statistical models. But the state would have a real big problem if its proficiency rate in 10th grade was the same as it was in 8th grade. That's to say, if only 54% of the state was proficient in 10th grade, with graduation resting on that test,
It would be like 2003.
the state would have a big problem. So, I mean, I don't mean to...
No, my question, I guess, from a professional standpoint, though, do you have some concern with regard to that? Or is it just a matter of, like, are we declaring what proficient is because we've got to get kids out of school and graduate them, or because we really think that's what kids need to know at that age?
If I saw over the next 3 or 4 years that exact trend, that 8th graders were 54% proficient, and all of a sudden, 2 years later, they're 80% proficient, then in fact, I would start questioning the validity of the test. Are we doing this because we don't want to have all of those concerns with regard to a high-stakes test and kids not walking across the stage with a diploma?
But you're not seeing those trends so far?
I have not.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we're going to have new baseline data when we start looking at POC. So we're going to start from scratch all over again with new data.
Okay, well, that's another question I have, but we'll get to that, sure. Thank you.
Going back to the prior slide for the English language arts, you see that 10th grade too, they have it 91%, so we're 2 below. It just seems like that 10th grade area in both the English language arts and the mathematics, for some reason, the state has their averages very, very high. So,
And to me, I would have to go back into last year's and just say, okay, what in fact was the state in ELA and mathematics, and why such an anomaly in 2013?
I can tell you that the high school, 10 years ago when this all started, was much farther behind the state than it is now. And, as we get closer and closer to 100%, it gets harder and harder to close that little bit of a gap left. But once upon a time, the high school was much farther behind, and it's done a lot to catch up with the state, although it's just not quite there.
it's not so much the gap, it's just, it seems like 10th grade is what they're targeted on, and for some reason we're below that.
Isn't that amazing that they're targeting on the 10th grade and you're targeting on the 10th grade, and in 2 years, those kids are walking across the stage?
Right.
The state does set those cut-offs for the raw scores are different for each grade. So what might be a raw score of, 32 out of 54 points, in 8th grade might be a particular scaled score, and in 10th grade it's different. It sets its own, each grade has its own, what they call thresholds, and those are based on a particular formula that they run. Right, so they're not the same, those cutoffs are not the same for each grade.
Again, I thank you for your informed answers, but what I was looking, the school district was to make grades private, and we should be proud. But somebody at one time made a decision to not test freshmen. We test all the way to that, and then we skip the freshman year. So I was kind of looking at more what some of the rationale was of why we don't test freshmen. It's a worldly experience when you're going from a middle school of a certain number of students and then coming to a high school with a large number of students. That's more where I was getting to. Please, I'm not trying to pick on the results. I'm proud of them, but Somebody made a decision somewhere not to MCAS in ninth grade. I'm just kind of wondering.
I promise you,
Yeah.
part of it was cost. It's the reason why there isn't a history test. There's the reason why there's not testing in science every year. These tests are very, very expensive, and at least part of the rationale for why we have not testing it every year is cost, which Park is, again, in part, trying to address that, because Park will be a every year test for English and math from, I don't know, grade it starts, starting in first or second, but it's gonna go all the way up to 11th grade. Because with the computerized test, they can do the test at a more cost-effective rate.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
This is a very interesting slide, because when we look at the accountability data, we then start measuring performance by targeted and groups of people who did not meet the target. So when we look at all of the students in the district, we look at 79% have in fact met the target. The performance target here is 75. So at 79, we've met the target. Then we have groups of students who are high-need group of students, and in fact, they test out at 59%, and 59% did not. So at 59, instead of getting to the 75, they did not meet the target. And so we look at how this data becomes disaggregated by different populations, such as the low-income group and the ELL and special education. So you can see, because even in the short time I've been in Attleboro, the amount of effort and the amount of time that's spent in the coordination of services for ELL kids, and you can see that you have an 86 and you've met the target. At the same time, you've got low-income kids and special education kids at 56 and 55, and they did not meet the target. Which says to me, putting the energy, putting the resources, putting the amount of personnel associated with that population, in fact, yielded results. When we look at the other cohorts of our different groups of students, in the Asian group of students have in fact met the target. The African American Black students at 60 did not meet the target. Hispanic and Latin American students did not meet the target, but they were close. The multi-race students did not meet them, and the white students overall met it that from 75 to the 80 that was necessary. But it gives us an idea of exactly how the district had done with regard to accountability for different cohorts of groups, that the data becomes disaggregated. And what was intriguing with this slide was exactly how accurate the comprehensive assessment was that you conducted in the spring of last year. And it named some of those areas at the time.
I just want to clarify that these scores are not percentages, they're an index score, and it's a very complicated formula that develops these indexes. A lot of different data points go in to create that score.
And when we ask
sorry,
the Department of Education to provide us with the formula of how you derive that score, they won't tell us. That's a formula that they have and only they have. And so we can sit here all day long, try to figure out the formula, and we've been unsuccessful so far figuring it out.
Ms. Crowe?
I know when the last time we were presented the proficiencies, the special education target didn't meet last time either, and I'm seeing it again here. So I'm wondering now, since the last two reports that I've seen, they haven't met target, if now, what are we gonna do differently? Because now it's two reports I've seen where they haven't been proficient.
And those slides are coming, and then I can answer that question even more directly
Okay,
when that time comes, if
Okay.
that's okay with you.
that's fine, thank you.
Mr. Parent?
I do want to say that one thing is consistent with last year, and that's the very high score in ELL. Sonia did an excellent job last year, too, and I think put out a thank you to Sonia and her team from the school committee, because she's doing a great job, and I know often her resources are very limited, so.
And one thing we should note is, as Dave said, these numbers, the PPI, are made up of a large group of pieces. They include proficiency, they include student growth, and they include some markers for extra credit. So if an area started with a lower target, we know it had further to go. So the incremental changes it has to make each year, the amount it has to move each year is going to be larger than the ones that start higher. Okay, so
And if I'm not mistaken, Michelle, there's a component of this that has to do with multiple years.
yes, this is 4
Right.
years worth of data.
So you won't necessarily see a dramatic change, even if 1 year is good, because if the previous years were weak, that's, weighted into the formula. So it takes a while, it takes a number of years to turn the data around in some cases.
Yes, it-
Hold on one second, Mr. Martin.
Just with regard to the PPI slide previously, and I know you just said that nobody wants to share what the formula is, but do you know at least whether or not some of the variables in that formula are locally based, or are, for instance, Hispanic and Latino students being compared to all Hispanic and Latino students across the Commonwealth? I mean, in other words, it seems like some of these demographics, as they're broken down, there could be variables that would distinguish from one community to another that would have an impact on whether or not the 75 PPI is an accurate marker.
We know the formula for PPI. We don't know the formula for percentile rank, which we'll get on the other one.
Okay.
The formula for PPI includes the proficiency rating, it includes growth, and it includes extra credit. And it counts the most recent year 40%, and each previous year goes down by 10%. So we have targets we have to meet.
Right.
If we meet a target, you'll see a number that's closer to 75. If we exceed a target, we'll see something that's closer to 100.
Okay.
If we don't meet a target, the 50s mean that you're slightly below targets. 25s, closer to 25 means you're much further away, and if you get 0, you declined and you're not within their band. So if you see something close to 75, it means you're right around the target. Okay, it's not really a percent. Something 50 means you're slightly below the target. Okay, so special ed is slightly below its target.
that window?
But remember, if special ed started further, so they may have to jump 8 points, whereas, an aggregate may only have to jump 5, okay? So those 100 points is above the target, close to 75 means you hit your target, closer to 50 you were below, and then, so those are the points you get, 100, 75, 25,
Okay.
0, 50.
And thank you for the patience. I understand that as individuals who are buried in these numbers on a daily basis, that the questions from the civilian community may seem a little.
And
Sorry.
to answer your question about who are the Hispanic students
the
being compared
cohorts.
to,
Right, sorry.
when it comes to their gaps, that's just about in Attleboro, our students
Okay.
versus where they were historically and our ability to move them towards proficiency. When it comes to growth, though, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, my understanding is that subgroup is being compared to the aggregate as a whole. So
Across the Commonwealth or districts of ours of the
when
same?
it comes to growth, it's every student that has a similar score.
Students like them, not in the same subgroup, but students who scored like them in the previous 2 years. Doesn't matter what subgroup they were in.
Okay.
We get Mr. Larson and Ms. Farrell.
I think one of the other points to just remember, I think it was part of your presentation last year, is some of these subgroups are larger and smaller on an annual basis. So when you look at some of the comparisons, even though they're weighted over the last 4 years, as you said, you could have a subgroup that had 50 in it last year and has 30 in it this year, or had 30 and went to 70. And while it's still a weighted average, it's hard not to have it be effective on looking at the trends. So it would be nice to know what the calculation is, to see what effect the number of people in each one of those subgroups, just due to some of the subgroups have some decent volatility to the population.
Well, I mean, to that point, this summer when we saw the preliminary data, the high school was being reported as a level 3 school because of participation in a particular subgroup. And when we looked into the data, we found that 2 kids had been misreported as not being tested that were tested. When we fixed that, just fixing the data on 2 students made the difference between the high school being a level 3 school and being a level 2 school. 2 students.
which is extremely significant.
School of 1,700 kids.
Right.
Their entire accountability status was determined by 2 kids.
And it needed 30 students to be a subgroup, that's the minimum. And it had 33, and a change of actually only one of those students would have made enough of a change.
I remember you saying last year, sometimes there are, some years you have the subgroup, and some years
Right.
those 29 kids go into the general population.
Right.
And then the following year, you might pick up 2 more, so you get the subgroup back. So I think that's important, and just looking at some of the data.
Right, and if you remember, in the past, schools weren't getting ratings because their subgroups were so small, which is why the state made the super subgroup of high need, which includes the 3 below it. And so therefore, more schools that were smaller, that weren't getting ratings, are now getting a high need rating, because the subgroup is now 30.
Ms. Crowe?
I think you answered most of my question. I just wanted to make it clear to those watching that this is a formula that they do across the board for everyone. They don't take into account the variables, like you're saying, like different schools in the state that we're compared to may have less or more in their subgroup.
Absolutely.
So it's, and they use just one, whatever the formula is that they use. So it could kind of throw things off a little bit with our comparison to the state, because we're different schools with different amounts of
At
children.
one time, the State Department of Education used to provide 2 groups of scores. One would be what you're seeing now, and the other one would be what they call the KOC. And it used to be the kind of community that you would be similar to demographically. And so you would be able to compare Attleboro with another community that was very, very similar to us. And then you'd have a very good picture as to how did our students do in comparison to a very similar community or like community. And that was really a positive way by which a lot of people looked at test scores at that time, and because of financial reasons and everything else, they chose not to do that any longer.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Parent, I think, Ken?
I'm still on that slide. I think you said this, I think you just said this, that the high needs group is made of low income, ELL, and special ed.
Yes.
Now, say if you had a white child who was of low income and special ed, they'd actually be reported 4 times on that chart? Or 5 times? Could it be part of all high needs, low income, special ed, or white, or do they only go into one category?
They can, and if they're in the high need group, they're counted by simply being in one of those other 3.
Okay,
If they're in the low income, ELL or special ed separate, they can be in more than one.
they could be in more than one, okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, they could be in 6 groups, because they're one of the races.
But the high need group is the unduplicated group.
Okay.
Dave, you want to do this?
All right, so this is a listing of the district and all 9 schools of our accountability data, the level. The state rates schools on a level of 1 to 5. 1 is, I forget exactly what they have a name for 1. That's the best you can be. And level 2 is, you're certainly doing well. The state doesn't really pay much attention to you. Level 3 is when the state starts to get you involved with certain regional initiatives. Level 4 is when you start to have some real state involvement. And level 5 is when the state takes over a school based on low performance. So the district is given the rating of its lowest school. So whatever your lowest school is, that's the rating for the district. So Attleboro is a level 2 because we do have 3 level 2 schools, but the good news is there are no level 3 schools in the district.
We had 1 level 3 last year, right?
Nope.
No.
What am I thinking of?
We had the same issue last year where we had data that had to be corrected at the high school, and they went to level 2, the district went to level 2.
I would have to say to that, well, Coelho, good job. They've done a great job down there. They really have. And Andy Bowles should be recognized for that, along with the staff. They've done a great
Yep.
job.
And Studley also changed from level 2 to level 1, which is not a small task because, like we said, it's multi-years of data. To make that significant impact in 1 year shows a strong push.
Mr. Murphy.
On that note, do we have any sense sort of how secure the footing is in those schools once they move levels? Or is it the case where, like with the high school, 2 students falling between the cracks for a couple of weeks could result, I mean, is it just depends sort of on what the formula spits out in terms of where you land?
It's a hard formula to leverage.
Yep.
But basically, again, the most recent year counts the most. So if your oldest year is a low number and you lose it and you bring a high one in, then you can stay up high. So if you're losing a strong number, but it's only counting 10% of the formula, then it's not as much. So
Right.
the basic idea is to continue improvement. So
Right.
as you continue to improve, then you should show stronger movement.
Because the more years you rack up as a level 1 school, the harder it is, even in an off year, to slide back, which again.
Unless you have a really low
Well,
year.
the bottom drops out, right. And again, I will, at the end, I would just like to ask to articulate the overall purpose and what value community members can take from these, because I think that is, just like the U.S. News and World Report formulas that publication insists on sacking higher ed institutions with. I think it's important to just be mindful of telling people exactly what value this has.
Mr. Parent?
I'll start off my comment by saying that my daughter does go to Hill Roberts. So looking at this score and the downward trend of the previous 2 years, and knowing that we have a new principal there, I'm just wondering, why is that elementary school doing not as well as others? And is there going to be resources to help to kind of figure out why? We got all elementary schools in ones, and it seems like the kids at Hill Roberts are a little bit lacking. And then Wamsutta, the parents could argue the same thing, why the 2 other middle schools doing at ones and while they're at it too.
I've done my own investigation with regard to Hill Roberts, especially over the last few weeks. I think there's a lot of reasons for the performance levels there. I think that it's necessary to recognize where you are within a school and then disaggregate the data to the degree as start looking at certain things. Is it the curriculum that is being taught? Is it the sequence by which we teach the curriculum? Is it the way that we teach in the classroom on a day-to-day basis as measured by MCAS? Is it a scheduling pattern? Is it something that we have to look at with regard to scheduling as to what subjects are taught at what times within the school day? So there's a lot of pieces to that. Your concern is absolutely legitimate of all the schools there. That's the number one school I have the concern about most. However, I thought the district did a tremendous job in hiring Scott Johnston as its elementary principal for Hill Roberts and being the education leader. Right from the start, he recognized some particular things and he made changes that would impact those particular subjects, especially in English language arts and mathematics. So we actually have a different scheduling pattern at Hill Roberts than we do at any of the other elementary schools at this particular time. At the same time, we focus on who the coaches are there in English language arts and mathematics, and how are we going to look at where are the best practices within the district who yield the best results for kids in the same cohort groups, and say, what are we going to do now? So I'm very, very confident with Michelle providing the data, with our coaches at the central office in mathematics and ELA, working with the coaches at Hill Roberts, and working with the administration. I think the teachers also have a new resurgence as to how important the data is and where they need to bring their kids. And I think they're accepting the leadership of Mr. Johnson as the education leader in that building at this time. So I'm very much encouraged that it's not about saying, okay, we've got the score and everyone will forget it tomorrow. No one's forgetting any scores.
Ms. Crowe?
The high school trend too is even last time it was low like this, to be 30 is, to see that number, it's kind of, a little bit frightening. But do we think it's that 10th grade piece that's really affecting this overall score, where we're seeing that in the 10th grade level, or do we think it's more than that?
Well, the number 30 is that ranking that the state won't explain how it does. But it's the high school being compared to every high school in the Commonwealth. The one thing I could say is that we looked at comparable communities to see how Attleboro High School compares to people with dealing with the same size and issues that Attleboro deals with. And one of the interesting things we found is that when communities have a big high school like we do, they pretty much have a score in the low 30s like we do. In communities where they have two high schools, one high school is a high-performing high school. So if you look, you find that one of their high schools is up in the 60s. Then they have a low-performing high school that's down in the 20s. So, you know, places that are splitting their kids into two different places, two different schools, are able to get one school to be with a higher score, but then their other school is got the lower score. Where we have all of our kids in one school, we have pretty similar results to people who have this similar demographics to Attleboro.
The one thing we know about the percentile rank is it's a gauge for level 3. Anything that's above 20 really has no impact on the rest of the score. So if the high school, for example, remember the cutoff is 75. They are 1 point off, 1 point. Out of all, when you put all these numbers together, they're 1 point off for the aggregate. They're at 74. They're 2 points off in high need. If those are both 75s, the 30 makes absolutely no difference. It makes them level 1. Okay? Where that percentile comes in is if they fall 20 or below. So that's why they stay on our radar. But as long as that stays above 20, the high school would have been a level 1 if those two numbers were both 75. So that's how close they were to a level 1. Okay? The other thing I forgot to note, not only Studley and Coelho, but Hyman Fine also moved from level 2 to level 1. Again, not an easy task for a school to change levels in that manner. So I didn't want to go without mentioning Hyman Fine.
And which means that the progression has taken place over the last couple of years. You just don't do it in 1 year.
Right. Thank you.
Ms. Furtado.
What do you think happened now, Wamsutta?
Wamsutta had a year where they dropped. Okay, they have been high performing all along. They haven't had consecutive low years. They had one low year this past 2013. Because that part of the formula is weighted almost half, it's weighted 40%, it really can sway you down. If your most recent year is low, and they had a couple grades where they had low growth and a drop in their performance. Remember, the formula takes both of those things into effect. So they had a couple grades where they had a drop in both of those, and because the weighting is 40% in the current year, it can pull you down the way it did.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that, I mean, last year Wamsutta was commended by the
Right.
state for its
Right.
achievement. And this year, you know, the
Right.
results were disappointing, and they have a level 2 status as a result. Well, I mean, you know, not much changed from 1 year to the next. So, I mean, we do have to look into, to try to find some reasons why the scores dropped. But I think it would be unwise to say any 1 year's scores in either direction really should be used to make a judgment about what, you know, all those people are doing every day. We really run a risk to put too much weight on 1 year's worth of scores. It's the trend that I think is much more important.
Right.
And Wamsutta's trend is a good one.
Right. Well, I was just wondering what actually changed, because if it, you know what I mean, if they were doing so well, and then all of a sudden it just kind of dipped. Was it staff changes? Was it, you know, less funding, Title I, things like that? Because I know Title I hit over there, that they used to have the Title I funding and now they don't. So I was just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, we got the results, you know, about a month ago. So these are things that we're going to be spending the next several months really digging into and trying to get to the bottom of what did happen. Because, I mean, while I do think it's important to say, you know, we shouldn't judge Wamsutta by 1 year's worth of results,
Right.
we have to take a good hard look at this results, because what we can't do is let these results come in again next year.
Right. I'd just be curious,
Yeah.
just to see if it was the funding, or I know there's been staff changes there, staff out, staff in,
Yep.
other schools, you know what I mean? So I'm
When we-
wondering.
When we present Wamsutta's improvement plan in the future, it should reflect what we think are the issues, and we should be able to speak to that at that time.
Thank you.
Mr. Murphy?
This seems like an appropriate time to ask the question that I've already previewed. Could you talk a little bit about exactly what value parents or community members should take from these numbers? Because certainly we can understand that level 1 was, as Mr. Sawyer said, as well as you can do, or whatever the official designation that we gave that is. So we understand that that's good, and we understand that we're nowhere near 4 or 5, which is also good. But beyond that, exactly like if you're trying to decide whether to enroll your child in the Attleboro school system, what should you take from this information?
I'll give Michelle the first crack at answering your question, but I think all three of us will be able to.
I'd like all three of you to
provide
chime in
some-
if possible.
some
so.
answer.
I would say overall, these results are very good. I mean, I've been in other districts where the population, we have almost 50% of our students that are high needs in Attleboro. To have only 3 level 2 schools is no small feat. Remember, this is a formula that takes into account performance and growth of students like them, not taking into account any of their subgroups. So compared to students scoring like them across the state, regardless of, any subgroup that they're in, Attleboro has got, moved from 3 of its schools from level 2 to level 1. I would be very proud of that. And the fact that I have schools very close to 75 means that we were very close to having a couple more in level 1.
So the trajectory, is that
Is what?
the trajectory, is that sort of a way of encapsulating the,
To support what Michelle was saying, this summer, late spring, early summer, I had the opportunity to sit on screening committees for administrators, and person after person came in and said that one of the reasons why they were applying for this job is they would be excited to work in a district with these kinds of results. Again, so many of the candidates who had done their homework on Attleboro really sang our praises and said that what we're doing here is remarkable, and that these results demonstrate that against some real serious challenges, we are making progress.
And
not that many communities, there are a lot of communities that wish they could say the same. I'll say it that way.
Communities are falling short because the high needs subgroup is not meeting their targets. So for our schools to be level 1, it had to have met. Most communities will meet the aggregate, but will not meet the high need subgroup. If you look at any of those communities in Attleboro, in many cases, is not only meeting the target, but in some cases, like Hewlett, 100 points. That means they're exceeding the targets for their high need subgroups. That's where the communities are falling short in that category.
mm-hmm.
If you look at any of those communities like us or surrounding communities.
If I was a parent looking to move into Attleboro and I was to look at MCAS data alone, I would start looking at kind of communities that offered what we have, but at the same time, say to yourself, you have 6 schools out of 9 who are level 1 and 3 are level 2. You would be hard pressed in the entire state to find a school system with the demographics that we have that in fact reach those totals of 6 number 1 schools and 3 number 2s. At the same time, if I'm a parent of looking whether I want to move out of Attleboro, I would have no reservations for myself to keep my children in Attleboro or to move into Attleboro, and I value education to the highest degree. My children would be going to the public schools in Attleboro. You have results, but you have a culture in your schools and you have an atmosphere in your schools that are conducive to teaching and learning. And you hear that because you don't have a lot of your teachers leaving on a day-to-day basis. So to work here as a teacher and to be supported and have resources necessary, in fact, is a credit to you as school committee people, but also to the town in itself. The bottom line is that these results probably are not duplicated in the type of community. That's why I would love to see us compared to the kind of communities that we are. I think they're excellent results. However, you do not get excellent results by resting. You get excellent results by saying, where can we improve in every single area, in every single school, in every single subgroup? That's how you improve an entire district. And so we have to take that very serious as we disaggregate the data. We look at it, review it with all the coaches, review it with all of the administrators, and review it with every single teacher in this district. And although you have test results starting in grade 3, don't forget that those test results are a culmination of kindergarten, first and second grade. Those people count as well. So you have to look back at how are those people doing as well prior to go with those kids learning and coming in and then finally taking MCAS results. So everybody plays a role in the education of the children in this community.
Thank you.
Please. So this is really interesting. So, in fact, when you're looking at results that are good, you start looking at, okay, so what has worked? And so when we look at it, there is no question that in the first piece, when we look at and review the data and the practices, and we look at student achievement as a whole, you don't get to where you are and you don't progress unless you continue with high expectations. We also look at, when we're looking at the matched intervention with students, specifically, what takes place with each individual child in each individual classroom. And you've got to look at those interventions that, with their scores, those things in fact have worked. So we need to continue that practice. Michelle.
So what's worked for us? We have looked at student data across the district. We meet with teachers at grade levels, and we monitor them throughout the year and note the kind of improvement and supports that they need. We have those regular meetings. Coaches do a nice job of supporting those, and the principals as well. The interventions are matched with their specific needs. So we would disaggregate the data based on areas that it might be weak. It might be number sense, it might be base 10s, it might be geometry. So we look all the way down to specific item types and questions. We target improvements for the school, not just at the district level, and for the grade. So if we know a cohort of students at a particular school in a particular grade is struggling, the supports are shifted to work with those groups. So we do that at incremental times during the year. We don't just wait for end of year data to come out. So we can adjust mid-course to address those concerns.
One of the most important things that we all have to realize is that it's very timely to get these results at this time of the school year. It allows you to make the adjustments right now in how you teach kids on a day-to-day basis. And looking at individual kids and looking at individual results, we can then frame new programs for kids and target resources to those groups of kids that we ordinarily wouldn't have had if we got the results sometime in the spring. And that's why MCAS, it wasn't always taken in the spring. At times, the standardized test results or tests were taken in the fall. And in fact, you wouldn't get the data back until the spring. This gives you the opportunity now to look at the kids who are sitting in front of us with those results. David?
Mr. Sheehan, while you're just on that subject, I don't want to get too far away from it, but let's move on to POC when it comes to MCAS, what you just said. Now, Attleboro and a lot of other communities in the state of Massachusetts probably do not have the technology to take POC online. There's quite a few communities that are not. If you're not, and yet there is a paper version, but if you cannot take the paper version, if you cannot take the online version, you have to take the paper version, what's the fallback on it?
I have asked the administrators of POC that question directly about 6 months ago in a huge forum in New England. And they were the 32 or 33 states in the country that are now scheduled to take the POC assessment. They were becoming very nervous because they started to find out that many school systems did not have either the technology in place or the infrastructure in place as is the situation in Attleboro to in fact take the online portion of the test. So they guaranteed me at the time, and so did the commissioner in Rhode Island, guaranteed me at the time personally, that there would be a written portion of the test. So I said, okay, so what, is it exactly the same test? Well, yes and no. Well, what do you mean? So they started giving me answers to that question. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Will we be receiving the results in the same fashion, in the same manner by which students took the test online from other districts? And the answer was no. We would be getting the results months and months later than our cohorts or our group of schools that in fact took the online version, because it's going to have to be graded in a different way. What does that mean to us? If we take the written portion of the test and we don't get the results for months later, then we gave up months of getting data by which we can look at kids and change programs and change resources and change the way we teach them. So it's imperative that our kids in Attleboro take the test in the same fashion that gives them the opportunity and advantage of everyone else who's taking it online. So that's why we started, as you know, Mr. Tyler, one of the major emphasis of my administration is to make certain that we do have the infrastructure and we do have the hardware necessary by which we're going to be able to take the online version of the test. And it's paramount right now in this district that we provide that for our kids. We do not want to give them a disadvantage with regard to taking this particular test.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan.
So, one of the things you brought out with, remember, while we work with these groups, we're also aligning our curriculum to the new standards, which is what Park is going to be assessing. So we have 2 years of transition here, which are giving us data on how well we are in meeting the rigor of that. So we're trying to check in at various points. So focused on critical areas of the new standards. So we've brought into trying to bring into clarity where we're going to put our efforts, and the new standards give us areas to focus in, and we're trying to see how well focusing on those areas adjust our performance. So that's one thing we're looking at. Types of writing, that has been a little bit of a moving target in what they're going to be assessing. So the fact that our grade 4 was able to improve the way that it did shows that we're doing a nice job in lining that. Students need practice in the 3 types of writing now, and not just the 1 type of writing that used to be designated for their grade level. Okay, so that's been a little tricky. Content areas, teachers need to implement the literacy. So the new standards now have literacy pathways that are supposed to go through science and history and those other content areas that are supposed to support the work of the ELA curriculum. So they're starting to infuse those into the other content areas now. Implement strategies to improve comprehension skills. This is one of the leverage points that we're really looking at. How can we improve the comprehension skills? Because when the level of rigor goes up, the in-depth analysis of what they're reading and asked to perform on is going to increase. So this is an area, another critical area that we're putting a lot of our effort into. Again, high school geometry is a full year, as well as algebra is a full year, and looking into further developing high-functioning teams. So looking at the data, having those collegial conversations, those discussions about what's working, what's not working, what's working in my classroom, what I can share with you. All of that collaboration is very important, especially in these couple years where we're all in flux, trying to adjust to the new standards. And leadership on key state initiatives. We get some information because of our seats on that Park team and our seats on the model curriculum teams. We get access to those units early and that information early. So that has been a big bonus to us. I can't emphasize that enough.
I can't emphasize enough 3 major points with regard to what has worked and what we need to continue. Obviously, it's about the expectations and the high expectations that we have, and that has to continue, but even more so, it's high expectations for every single child sitting in our classrooms, every child. At the same time, we need to look at the high school program of studies. We have to look at where courses are being offered, and then when we do get the results, we can start aligning scope and sequences of what portions of the test and what percentages, for example, in math, in fact, trigonometry or algebra or geometry, and how much of the emphasis. So I'm really happy that the adjustment's already been made to go to a full year of geometry. And most importantly, it's a term that's really bandied about today, and that's the term called rigor. And it's a term that's misused frequently, but rigor, in fact, for one student may be very different than another student. And so the point of rigor has to be that we need to challenge every single child to where they are and at what their level is. But never to the point of overwhelming the child to push them over the edge. But the rigor in what we teach in the classroom in an inquiry-based approach for every single child is something unique. So we just can't use the term rigor as a universal term. It's an individualized term for every single child because they all come with different skills and a different place by which they're being taught in our classroom.
Ms. Furtado?
Very well said. Thank you.
Max told me what to say.
Nice job, Max. Speaking for the students, I like it.
It's interesting when we look at what are the next steps. So we look at the district improvement planning, and that goes on, and I really believe that Attleboro has put together a very good team, led by Michelle and some of our other coaches and so forth, and I think Mr. Sawyer does an outstanding job as the assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum, in charge of assessment, et cetera. He does a tremendous job with regard to what the district does as a whole and how we're going to plan from one year to the next, which in fact is data-driven. Decisions in this magnitude, in fact, are made by looking at the data and disaggregating data appropriately. Interestingly enough, we have a real new focus on what the school improvement plans are going to be in this school year. And so it's about looking at every program in your schools. It's about putting that group of people together in each individual school and coming up with a school improvement plan that moves every single child forward. And it's not the majority of the students, it's not the middle 50%, it's moving every single child in a particular way that meets their individual needs. And in fact, it's that high expectation from where that child is to where we're looking to move them. You know, the team setting goal, I look at this in a couple of ways. I look at central office and I look at the team in central office, and I look at the curriculum group in central office, and we get together and we look at what the plan is for the entire district with some emphasis on specific schools and how we want to approach this. But team setting goals, in fact, take place in the school improvement teams and school councils at every single school level as well. Every administrator, every teacher will be setting goals, in fact, that will increase student achievement in all areas, not just English, language, arts, and mathematics, not just those which are tested. We need to do this across the board. We are going to be assessing science. We need to work, and we need to start putting resources and our energies in the science curriculum as well. And so that has to be an emphasis. You are going to be graded on that. You are going to be measured by your science scores as well. And when we look at the creation and revision of the district common assessment, those revisions and just looking at those assessments give us a spotlight into what the future will hold. How we do in the present and what plans we implement in order to improve student achievement across the board will give us what we need to have in the future. And the district common assessments are part of that equation in order to get to where we want to be. I think you've collectively put together a very, very good team in Attleboro to accomplish the task. If you did not, you wouldn't have those 6 schools at number 1 and 3 at number 2.
Agreed.
Dave, you want to add anything to that? Jeff?
Comments. I mean, I think I just want to add to this, and I know we talked about it before. I mean, obviously, it's the funding levels of the school. You know, now we're on FY '14, and basically the funding level right now is probably what it should have been in the FY '11 budget. So we're 3 years behind even on that funding level because of the recession and stuff like that. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm actually proud of the results. I think Mr. Sheehan, you know, you spent over 40 years in education.
That many? Yes, now that I had here back then.
But I think we need to sometimes take it with a grain of salt. Is there sustainability in when you're achieving as a district and making high things? There's going to be a leveling off, and then there has to be a new plan put in place of how you're going to reach the next plateau, and then you got to come up with the funding to do so. I mean, is that something that you've seen in your 40 years? Kind of know we talked about it before.
And I've spent the last 3+ months conducting my own assessment in Attleboro. I believe that the per pupil expenditure is lower than it should be. I believe that the curriculum offerings are not as rigorous as they should be. I believe that the curricula offered to our students at levels K to 12, in fact, should be greater than what are offered. So I will give you a couple of examples. We do not have a world language program at all in our middle schools. Our music programs need to be ramped up tremendously in our middle schools and as well as our art programs. In our elementary schools, we have neglected areas such as our science curricula, and we need to work hard at those. We've spent a lot of energy and a lot of resources getting math scores and ELA scores, but at what expense? So when we look at other pieces at the high school level, and we look at rigor and course offerings that are offered to our students, that they may pale in comparison to other surrounding high schools to be offered to all of our students. And we're lucky to have a career center right attached to our school and part of our high school is a tremendous advantage. And you pay to sustain that, and that's tremendous. But when we say, and you asked this question, Mr. Tyler, in the June 2013 school committee meeting in which I was in the audience looking, and you asked a question to a person, a technology expert, so to speak, how far behind is Attleboro with regard to technology? And the person really skated the question and someone didn't answer it. And the answer to your question is minimally 10 years behind. And we have not put forth the resources necessary in the last 10 years in order to keep up with anyone else. So it's time to pay the piper, so to speak. We know that in the next 6 months to 1 year, with all the homework that's being done in the technology field right now and where we are absolutely going to have to address this, and you will not be addressing it with pennies. We need to do this because our students need to have 21st century technology skills to compete. We can't send Max to one of the top schools in the nation with poor technology skills or technology skills that he had to get on his own. We can't send students into our military without the technology skills. We can't send our students into the workforce without the appropriate technology skills. And currently, that's what we're doing. So we need to look at it in a different way. And I know that this one endeavor has the attention of you as a school committee. You mentioned it in your comprehensive assessment. I know we have the attention of our mayor. And I know we have the attention of every administrator and teacher in the Attleboro Public Schools. We will get better, we will progress, and I guarantee you, our students will leave our school system with the technology skills to compete in the 21st century. That is, without question, we'll be able to do that. But it's going to take resources, and in fact, we need to look at all those opportunities that our students may not be receiving right now.
Superintendent Sheehan, just one second, I just want to back up a little bit. Now, because of the budget cuts that we, forced in 2010, 2011, 2012, I believe, a lot of positions were eliminated from the Attleboro public school system. And I think that's somewhat where you're getting at here. Maybe that's something that we need to look at, whether or not the costs, I should say the result that we want out of it is being cost effective. Something like the grant writer, something like a technology director. I mean, these are all positions that were lost somewhere because of financial things, but I think, I don't know the right way to say it, are we being penny wise, dollar foolish on some
Right,
things?
right now, this second, you are paying the price for a direction that maybe someone didn't know, or a group of people didn't know what would be the fallout. However, every day, central office administration, building level administration, secretaries in schools, and all of your teachers feel the pinch of not having a director of education technology that should have been at central office 7 or 8 years ago. You don't have an HR director. You don't have a curriculum director. You don't have a transportation director. Everyone wears multiple hats. You in fact have purchased student information systems, such as the Aspen system, that is only operating at 5% of its capacity, because you don't have someone able to create the programs in Aspen and be able to utilize student information services by which we could save money in the long run, and I'm talking substantial money. So, if you truly want to know why you have transportation problems starting the week before school and still have them today, 5 weeks after school has ended, it's because you haven't developed your Aspen system by which to provide the information to the bus companies to develop a bus list. And the list goes on of all those things that are connected. Minimally 15 different platforms and modules should be connected to Aspen, and right now you probably have 2 or 3 operating. Short-sighted, if you will, not having the personnel necessary to run it or create it. There wasn't a legitimate plan by which to invoke on this journey of information systems, which ties in all the other important systems in the district, including curriculum, including teacher evaluation, including transportation, food services, special education, just to name a few.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan.
Right, quick question.
Brenda?
A lot of key people that is needed to keep us running smoothly, which we haven't been in the past. You brought up an HR director,
Yes,
Race to the Top.
yes.
That was a grant that we had for an HR director. Or not totally for, but maybe to implement or for the grant.
It's an interesting scenario that you just painted.
Okay,
What you're referring to is the HRPP, or the Human Resource Pilot Project, which that money came from Race to the Top.
Okay.
Which was promulgated by 2 individuals, Susan Friedman and John Safia. Created that for 3 as a competitive grant, in which Attleboro won one of those competitive seats of the 3. Brockton was another one, and Revere. Although it was called the HR grant or the Human Resource grant, it did not really call for a Human Resource director, but people raised their eyebrows of saying, you received the grant, you don't even have an HR director. How did that happen? So people are questioning that now. Do I believe in the spring of 2014, when the people from the State Department of Education and the federal government, who, it's the taxpayers' money, evaluate where Attleboro is, I believe that one of the recommendations coming from those people will be to hire a human resource director within the district that will help tie in the 7 levers that are associated with that grant. They'll make that recommendation.
Not to get too far, of course, but.
Yep.
Mr. Murphy?
I just wanted to say thank you again for, and particularly to Ms. Roy, for all of the information assembled and being able to articulate it and communicate it to the committee and to the community as eloquently as all 3 of you did. As I said, I mean, I understand these are extremely difficult concepts that these evaluations are attempting to sort of harness. And I think that's why it's important for the committee and really for the community even more so to really keep in mind exactly what it is we can glean from the information and what it is that we can't. Because whenever it comes to institutions, educational institutions that are being compared to each other, there's always a tendency to want to put the institution itself into a basket. Well, that's a good school system, that's a bad school system, that's an improving school system, that's a declining school system. And it seems to me that on the whole, it seems like the information is good, encouraging, the trends are good. There are obviously major areas of concern that need to continue to be addressed, but I think it's important that we communicate that information to the community in a way that reduces the risk of stigmatizing particular schools or the district as a whole, because there's no 6,000 school district in the country that I know of at least that doesn't have major challenges that we need to continuously work on. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next item on the new business is the personnel report by our Assistant Superintendent, Dave Sawyer.
Thank you. I have a couple of items for this evening. One is a retirement, Rosemary Siegel, paraprofessional at Hewlett. I have 2 resignations, Christine Donahue, paraprofessional at Studley, and Renee White, paraprofessional at the high school. And then I have several appointments. Lisa Doman, adjustment counselor at Hill Roberts. Lauren McDonald, Insights teacher at Hewlett. Stacy Baptiste, paraprofessional in the Learning Lab program at Wamsutta. Meg Jacobs, a paraprofessional in the Early Education and Care of Children program at the high school. Catherine Larry, paraprofessional in the Insights program at Hewlett. Kelly Monson, paraprofessional in the Insights program at Hewlett. Caitlin Tella, paraprofessional in the Network program at the high school. Renee White, paraprofessional for the high school. Rebecca Ahrens, SLPA at Thatcher. Colette Howe, BCBA for the district as a whole. And Kathleen Pereira Vaz, LPN for Project Success at Thatcher. I also have this evening brought forward for Mr. Sheehan to put forward for appointment Lisa Wood, school nurse for split between high school and Bremen.
I do see that Rosemary Siegel, 20 years, and I always like to thank teachers in our system who've been here that long. It's nice to have that stability in our system and teachers that stay. So, to say thank you to her, and good luck.
Well, good. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer.
I believe we need a motion on Lisa Wood.
For BDC.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was under, I think, the superintendent's recommendation. So we have the superintendent's recommendation to appoint in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 71, Section 53, the school nurse. Mr. Sheehan.
I'd make the recommendation to the committee that you vote affirmatively with regard to this candidate.
Second.
So
Second.
moved. Second.
I'm sorry.
No.
Discussion?
Sounds like a great appointment. Thank you for the recommendation.
You're right, though. Normally, David would come from the school committee member to make the recommendation.
Then I will
Or the
recommend
motion.
that we appoint Lisa Wood as the school nurse based on the superintendent's recommendation.
Second.
And I'll second that motion. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Okay, moving on to committee reports. Finance, Facilities, and Procurement Subcommittee, Mr. Parent.
All right, we got a couple of motions bring forward. First motion to approve the budget transfer request put forth by the business manager. I one has the attachment. Total amount was $660,000.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Here none. Motion passes. Second motion, this is regarding the transportation contract. I make the motion to approve the final fiscal year 13 transportation report to City Council.
Second.
Discussion? None. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Here none. Motion passes. Final motion is to approve the copy of maintenance contract effective July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2014 with Rico.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Here none. Motion passes. We got 5 warrants to read today. Favorite part? First one dated September 4th, 2013, the amount of $435,834.03 of encumbrances of $383,542.91. Special funds of $5,920, encumbered funds of $12.68, federal and state grants $29,242.66, bond funds of $9,599.42, encumbered federal and state funds $2,008.47, and total encumbered revolving $5,499.89. Second one dated 9/11/2013 in the amount of $124,407.80. Special funds of, encumbered funds of $109,303.49. Federal state grants $7,988.80. Revolving fund $7,115.53. Next one dated September 18th, 2013 in the amount of $320,737.89. Encumbered grants of $248,372.86. Special funds $115. Federal state grants $80,011.67. Revolving funds $59,365.80. Encumbered revolving of $2,872.66. Next one dated September 25th, 2013 in amount of $108,262.04. Encumbrances $89,277.44. Special funds $1,014.40. Federal state grants $14,095.62. Revolving funds of $3,820.48. Encumbered state funds of $46.10. Last one dated October 2nd, 2013. Amount of $628,583.40, which encumbrance make up $563,578.67. Federal state grants $17,379.71. Revolving funds of $47,597.30. And total encumbrance federal state grants of $27.75. Our next meeting will be held on Wednesday, October 23rd at 7 p.m. And members, Chair, concludes our business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to Curriculum and Instruction Subcommittee, Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next meeting will be held tomorrow night here at 6:30. You all should have gotten my note about our special education overview. Please feel free to join us. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Moving on to Policy Subcommittee, Ms. Furtado.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a meeting on September 16th, and I have a Policy BE School Committee meetings with the edits attached, or already actually indicated, to be approved by the committee tonight. So I have a motion to approve Policy BE School Committee meetings with edits.
Second.
Questions? Yes?
This was essentially the, I'm sorry, are we doing the minutes? This is the B,
No, the minutes we haven't approved
okay, we're,
from our previous meeting. This
Okay.
is just, we're approving, this
the
was,
minimal monthly meetings, correct?
that is correct. That
Okay,
was
I
something that was
apologize.
that was discussed, remember, at a full committee. They
Yes.
mentioned it, went back to policy. We
Yeah,
just
and-
kind of,
and
we
I-
had to approve it up from policy to the full.
Correct. And there are a couple points that I wanted to walk through, a few reservations that I have, although I'll preface it by saying that I'm still comfortable voting for the amendment as it passed through the policy subcommittee. And this was mentioned at the first time it came to the full committee, and it was we talked about it down at the policy subcommittee, and I mentioned at the time that I felt I was comfortable with the caveat that I felt like it was a policy change that we were going to have to keep a close eye on, and there may very well be adjustments that have to be made over time. So the first point that I wanted to raise in response to a lot of the concerns that I've heard since we first decided to go from 2 meetings a month to 1 a month is that there's much more to serving on the school committee than just coming to meetings. That there's work within the community, there's work in the buildings, there's a variety of, there are endless ways that someone can contribute as a member of the school committee beyond merely attending meetings. One of my favorite examples of that is always when we've had some administrators retire. On their final day, Mrs. Zito has showed up with a tray of brownies or a cake of some kind to wish them well. Not something that's going to be televised or recorded in minutes, certainly, but the type of thing that you need to do. So keeping that in mind, again, I don't have any objection to it. The other issue that I think may have gotten sort of lost in some of the discussion the last time this came up is the degree to which this policy is enforceable regardless of whether it says 2 meetings or 1 meeting. In order for the school committee to convene, there has to be a quorum present, which means there has to be a majority of the members. In order for the school committee to enforce a policy, there has to be a majority of support for the enforcement. So whether the policy says 2 meetings a month, 1 meeting a month, 30 meetings a month, the only way this policy could be enforced would be if a majority, some combination of members, both refused to meet and then reprimanded themselves for refusing to meet, which is a scenario that would not play out under almost any circumstances. So given that, again, I think it's important to have the policy because it helps the community set an expectation as to essentially how long it could potentially be before the governing body of the school system convenes. And so I think it's good that we have it, but the exact number is, I think, pretty irrelevant. And the last point that I would make, and this was touched upon the last time it was discussed here, is that this committee has had an unfortunate pattern at times of misusing this form.
Can we get back to this policy just on
I'm
the
on it.
B? So I know that you mentioned before previously that you had concerns about it. I remember speaking with Mr. Sheehan, you said that if at any time we needed to either have another meeting or anything, that you'd be more, that you'd make sure that the committee was advised and stuff like that.
Which,
So I just want to
return to my point,
move on.
that I believe that's true. In fact, that's already happened. We've already had an instance in which the committee needed to convene for a special meeting to appropriate the funding to expedite the repairs of the Attleboro High School swimming pool.
Right, there's always special meetings sometimes that happen, yeah.
It is. And I think that's, again, another reason why I'm comfortable with the change. But as I was saying, the reality is we have all identified the need to help promote our school district. And I think at times the school committee meetings haven't done that, frankly. And so that's another reason that I'm comfortable with it. Now, the concerns that I've heard, and I don't know that I will not speak for other members, is that there is, to some degree, a perception that the school committee is voting to reduce its own workload. I don't think that's true for the reasons that I already stated. I think the work is very varied. I think it varies by the circumstances. I think it varies by the member. But the people that have raised these concerns have a point. They have a point that the expectation when the committee was elected is that there would be 2 meetings a month, and now, while in office, we're deciding to reduce that. Again, for the reasons I've stated, I think that's fine. But I do think that we need to couple that with some measure of accountability and transparency. I don't think we can just say to the community, we're going to change this policy, we're going to go from 2 meetings to 1 meeting, and then not also add some sort of provision that demonstrates to the community our commitment to the school system and to the job that we were elected to do. So my suggestion would be that in addition to passing this policy, which again I support, I think we should vote to make accessible, or more readily accessible, information that is already within the public domain. It's already public record, and that would be our attendance records and our voting records with regard to votes missed. I think that is a demonstration that this committee, while we may only be obligated via policy to convene once a month, that we are continue to be committed to serving the community and overseeing the school system and exercising the responsibilities that we were elected to do.
Is that it? Okay. I would be more than happy if you would like to, I'd be actually more than happy to put it on the next policy subcommittee meeting, if that is something that that you're recommending, and we can discuss it at that level, and then we can bring it forward or not.
Well,
That would be
may I
great too.
respond?
I'm still talking, hold on one second. So I think that would be important, because if it's changing a policy or we want to add something, it really shouldn't be discussed at this level at this time. Be glad to put it on the policy subcommittee meeting agenda, and then we can go from there. So that'd be great if you could send me something as the policy chair,
Well-
that would work.
May I respond?
Go ahead.
I understand, and if it was a change to a policy, I would certainly follow that recommendation. I think in this instance, there isn't a policy on point that I'm suggesting that we amend. I'm saying that our records that are already part of the public record should be more accessible. And that is a decision that I think the full committee could make on its own, and I would recommend that we do.
Okay, Judy, all those records, minutes and all that are public, correct? So any member of the community could, I'm sorry?
They're online.
They're online, so they can see voting results and all that. Okay, first I saw Barbara, then you, Mike.
That was my question. The minutes that approve shows who attended meetings, who didn't, and the voting, right? So this would kind of be like just a duplication, just pulling it out of the minutes, if we were to do that, correct? Okay.
Oh, is that
Okay,
Mike?
yeah, I just want to bring everything back into focus here. We're talking about policy BE. David, if you have other concerns, I don't think that belongs in with this policy. I understand your
Right.
concerns. I understand your concerns. But I don't think that belongs in this discussion about the changes of the monthly meetings and bi-weekly. That's all. If you want to
No, I'd be
discuss
more-
that after, but I mean, that's fine too.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I don't think it belongs in this policy with this.
Right.
And I'm
I
sorry,
am-
if I may have misspoke, I agree with that. I don't think this does belong as an amendment to this policy.
Okay,
I
so
don't-
now we can do.
All right, I am-
I'm saying that I think it would be,
Okay.
given the change that we are about to make, and I assume this policy will pass because everyone seemed in favor of it the last time it was up at the full committee, I think that it would be in the interest of the committee and of the community to also make accessible what is already a public record. Not as an amendment to this, just as a separate motion.
Okay, I'm going to go back to file BE, school committee meetings. And I just want the community to know that, and I'm going to read this policy now so nobody is confused regarding file policy BE. The Attleboro School Committee will transact all business at official meetings of the committee. These may be either regular or special meetings defined as follows. Regular meeting, the usual official legal action meeting held regularly. Regular meetings of the school committee shall be at least once each month, which it was twice, but that's what this committee chose to bring forward as once each month, on Monday evenings from September through June, and at least one each month on a Monday evening during, we used to have July, August, and December, but at our June meeting, we always would vote to cancel out or not attend on July. We come back in session on August and December. When the chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary are absent, the member senior in years of service shall preside, which Fran has done that for us. So 2, we have subcommittee meetings. The school committee, and now nothing has been changed at this level. The school committee will use regularly scheduled meetings held to address topics specific to the identified subcommittee. The subcommittee may make recommendations for committee action, but it may not act for the school committee. We do also have special meetings. Special meetings at the school committee may be held on the call of the chairperson of the school committee or any 3 or more members by written notice delivered in hand or to the place of residence or business of each member at least 48 hours in advance of the time set. That has not changed. Every meeting of the school committee, regular subcommittee, or special will be open to the public unless the executive session is held in accordance with state law. And any records, how people voted, who attended, what was said, as Judy mentioned, it is available to the public. So right now, we're going to bring forward school committee meetings, file BE. Any other questions?
Just quick discussion.
Yep, sure.
Just elaborating on what Mr. Murphy said and what this is about and what I talked about at an earlier meeting. And I think it was Ms. Zito actually added at the end of our previous meeting. This is not to take away time constraints for the committee. This is the time for the administration, a new administration, to work with the new principal, to work with everybody and try to come up with their new plan on what they want to do. This is no way of the school committee trying to get out of not coming here every second Monday. I think as Ms. Zito said, we're trying something. If it doesn't work, well, we revert back to the old ways. And as Superintendent Sheehan said, of course, there was going to be special presentations that are going to have to be invoked into our schedule, just like we had tonight with MCAS. There are certain things that are time sensitive where they will be stuck into there. So, but I think the public needs to know. I mean, everybody in this committee sits on a subcommittee. Most members sit on 2 subcommittees. Those are offset from every week than our full committee meetings. This committee itself has also served on search committees that have replaced the superintendent of schools and all top administrators and principals. So there's been a lot of work done by this committee. So when I've heard some of the comments, Dave, that you just mentioned. Okay, they have a right to those. That I understand that we signed up for this, but I will say that I don't believe that's true in the majority of this committee whatsoever. I mean, there's been a lot of hard work done by this committee, a lot of time taken out above and beyond what I would say. And so, again, this change is just to try to give the administration a little bit more time to come up with their plan going forward and give the administrators a little bit of break, a little bit of breath, so they don't have to attend a meeting every second week if it's not called for. If it's called for, then Mr. Sheehan's going to call me, and we are going to make that meeting happen. So again, I just want to touch
Right.
on that.
And again, I just want to make sure that any votes, anything that happens in our meetings, Judy is here, present. She'll be more than willing to give you that access. The minutes are online. Everybody can see how people voted, who was here, who was not here. And again, this policy actually was, the superintendent was involved in this, and like Mike said, is to give the administration more time together to pull things together and to bring more information to us. That's kind of why we came down to this policy with the change. So I'm bringing it forward, so we have a motion on the floor, it was seconded, so now we are just going to vote. I'm closing all sessions with file BE. This we've discussed, so
Dave,
it's,
if you have a discussion about BE, we'll bring it back up, but I'll allow you the floor after we're done with the
right,
policy.
if this is all set,
And
'cause-
the last point I wanted to make is
well,
that,
we're gonna bring file BE forward. So all in favor? Aye.
I,
Okay. Opposed?
No.
So 1. Abstentions? None. Judy, 1. Mr. Parent. Our next meeting will be held on November 25th. It will be at 7 PM. It was stated on here at 5, but it will be at 7 PM. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Thank you.
Murphy,
Okay.
thank you, Mr.
I'm going to
Chairman.
give you the floor because I think we touched upon it, and Mr. Fowler touched upon it too. Yes. All our records are available. But I think the subject you were getting on, and that's why I was trying to ponder through my head, where does it belong? Normally, I would not allow somebody to bring a motion forward unless it's done in subcommittee. That's just the way we work as a committee. But I'm listening to your question and I'm saying, well, where does it belong? I think you brought up a valid point. There's mass law that contains the public record. Of course, we want to have transparency and accountability. So, with that being said, you can
Sure.
feel free to answer that, but I just want to make sure that got out of the policy subcommittee at this time. But feel free to take the floor now.
No, and I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and as I said, I agree with the committee that I don't think it was a necessary amendment to that policy. I think it is relevant to that policy because if the committee is going to reduce the number of meetings that we potentially convene, and again, we've only had this for 1 month and we haven't reduced the meetings because we did have a special meeting, and I suspect that's going to happen most months. But as we are perceived to lower the expectation by the community, then I think that heightens the expectation that members will attend regular and special meetings. And the reality is that we have not always seen that. And so that is why I'm inclined to suggest that we consider a provision that, again, this is not I don't really consider this a particularly substantive committee action, because it's not like we are considering whether or not to make our attendance records public. They already are. They have to be. Executive session and open meetings. But I do think that we have a responsibility to make them more readily accessible. I don't think that the members of the Attleboro community should have to sift through, and this, by the way, is our 50th meeting of the term. I don't think they should have to sift through 50 sets of minutes to determine who showed up at meetings and who skipped significant votes. I don't think that the onus is on the public to do that. I think the onus is on us as the governing body of the school system to be as transparent as we can and to hold ourselves accountable. And so that's my rationale. I understand some members may disagree with it or may think that the publication of the minutes, which we're legally obligated to have, is sufficient. I think we need to take one step further and be more accountable and be more transparent. So I'll make a motion that we make publicly available at all the schools and via the Attleboro School District website the attendance records of school committee members and a recording of all votes missed due to absences.
Dave, one more time, please. Can you repeat the motion, please?
A motion to make publicly available at all schools and via the Attleboro School District websites the attendance percentage of all school committee members and a recording of all votes missed due to absence on substantive matters not part of the regular consent agenda. I don't know that the public needs a recording of the votes missed on field trips.
Second, so we can discuss it.
All right, we do have a motion, we do have a second, so I think we have to open this up for discussion here a little bit.
Do you want me to make
The only thing that was running through my head, Dave, really, that I'm thinking about this, is are we looking at something like the only thing that flashed through my head was like the Sun Chronicle. In all honesty, is how they have the thing of the representatives and his local senators on how they voted, their attendance record. I mean, is that something like a format we're looking at? I don't know.
I think so. I mean, I don't envision this as being like a telephone book. I think this is, there are 9 members, there's a percentage of meetings attended, and if a substantive vote is missed, it's just a simple sentence as to what the motion is. I don't foresee it as anything more complicated than that, and again, I don't see it as a particularly substantive matter, because the issue is not whether or not the record is public. The issue is, are we being transparent enough in terms of how accessible the records of the business of the school committee is? And I think given the change that we're making with regard to the total number of meetings, I think we have an obligation to heighten our sense of responsibility with regard to that.
I'm going to just ask Judy a quick question here, not to put her on the spot. I mean, how long does it take to compile something like this?
I don't know, you're talking going 2 years back, is that, what am I doing?
And again, Judy Nilsson is our recording secretary for the school committee, so she's the one who does our background search for us, everything, so.
I don't know how long, I mean, I'll have to go through 2 years worth of minutes, so, I mean, I don't know.
Are you looking at going back or going from this point on?
I believe it should be based on a current school committee. All of our records should be available. And I would say, Mr. Chairman, with regard to the time, I bet it's about a 3 or 4 hour project.
Barbara?
I guess my question is more underlying where we're gonna be putting like information out there, and if it's just gonna look like some people who maybe had a family issue, weren't here, emergency surgery or out like that, they're gonna look like they just didn't wanna come to a meeting, but there were legitimate reasons why they couldn't be here. So then we're gonna get into that part where it gets, I think, political, and this one's always here and this one isn't, and the community needs to know that, everyone has emergencies that come up, and that's what I'm just wondering with this information where it's already in the minutes. Do we wanna just stick it out there to try to say, oh, look how bad this looks, but you know what? Her husband, however, had a heart attack and he was in critical condition, so they couldn't make 3 meetings. So do we want the public to hold that against a committee member? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the purpose of this is if it's in the minutes.
May I respond?
And we don't want to put in there why, because
I
it's
think-
not, right, anyone's
Dave,
business.
if you want to just hold back, I think Mr. Perrin also had a question. Maybe you can just answer both of them, since you're the originator of the motion. Mr. Parent?
Well, in regards to Judy's time, she'd also have to be the judge and jury of what criteria are we going to set it. It's any non-normal consensus or any other vote besides that, and I go with the subcommittee votes at the full committee meetings. That's one concern, so we'd have to have a criteria put forth for Judy, like only full committee, non-subcommittee. First concern. Second concern is, to me, this is almost like putting together a checklist for, and I'm not running for re-election, but it's like putting together a checklist for the people who are running for election and saying, here's some ammo for you, because we don't want you to take the time to go through the minutes yourself for the past 2 years. I don't like this idea. We are very open, honest. All our meetings are published, and people who want to know are either watching the meetings or they read the minutes. I don't see why we have to be any more transparent than this.
Mr. Murphy?
Just with regard to Mr. Crow's comment, I agree it's a very reasonable and fair concern. However, I would also say that whether this school committee wants to acknowledge or not, we have a major attendance issue, and I don't think that we can be the only group in the community that is going to ignore that. And so it's a very fair point. People miss meetings, and I don't think that the community is insistent on 100% over the course of a 2-year period. I think people are pretty reasonable, but I think that reasonability has its limits.
Okay, I think my question, are we looking to do this for the start of this committee's term, or is this something we're looking to start as of November 1st? I mean, what is your intention? That's all.
I think that, again, the context, and I understand the political concerns that Mr. Parent raised, and it's a valid, that as well is a valid concern. And again, I don't see this as a particularly substantive or sensational motion because the information already is public. I guess that would be my response to that. But, if we had reduced our number of meetings 6 months ago, I think I would have been inclined to try to couple it with a provision of accountability and transparency then. We didn't. We did it now. And I have a problem, or a concern, I guess, that's grown, that I don't think we should be perceived as merely reducing our workload. This is not going to solve that problem in its entirety, but I think that it helps to demonstrate to the community that the governing body of the school system takes its job seriously and is willing to be held accountable.
Ms.
One more
Crowe.
comment. We only have a few more meetings left until the new committee comes in, and we're not sure who will be reelected and who will be new. And I know we've mentioned in the past, to me, with all due respect, I think it should be up to the new committee since we're already almost through our term here. So if they decide that that's where they want to go forward, but to go back now in the past and pull things out, I don't see the substantial reason for that right now because a new committee is coming in.
Yeah.
So right now, that's in the past and we're moving forward where we're progressing. We're working on all kinds of new things. We have a new superintendent. Now to go back on stuff like this, I think we should be looking forward and let the new committee bring this up, and then it should be their vote, because now we're putting something in place where maybe none of us will be here next time around. And again, I don't think that's fair to the new people coming in.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Ray.
I hear the reservations. I think that the political context that Mr. Parent raised is an extremely valid one. I personally feel that this is something the school committee owes to the community. But given the context and the reservations voiced by several members of the committee, I'm happy to withdraw the motion. But I'll just note that I think it's something we should consider in the future, or some school committee should.
I do agree, but I just feel it should be maybe the next people
Understood.
that come in. If this was earlier in the term,
And
of
Ms.
the
Grotz's-
validity of your point, I do believe,
Sure.
but.
It's a valid point, and for
Right.
that reason, I withdraw the motion for the time being.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, hold on, no, I just want to, stop a minute, sir. Thank you, Mr. Murphy, you throw your motion. You put, but I will,
Mr.
I
Chairman.
have to add to that comment, okay? I don't care what the elections, happens in these elections.
Right.
I really don't.
Right.
But what I will tell you is, you are elected to serve here until January 1st, 2014. We have a lot of work to do. We owe it to this administration, these students, to get work done. We will do work we will do whatever we have to do to move stuff forward, no matter what the election results are. So I don't want that to be thrown into there in any way, shape, or form, like we're going to be a lame duck committee for the next 2 months, because it ain't happening. If you don't want to vote, then stay home. But realistically, I don't want to hear that from anyone, because that's not going to be the reality here.
And Mr. Chairman, I think that's obviously a valid point that I think we'd all agree with. And again, I'm happy, the concerns raised are extremely valid, they're well-grounded. I'm happy to withdraw the motion. I don't withdraw my concern. I think my concern persists, but I think it's an issue that can be brought up at a later date.
And I think we had a very nice discussion that it was brought forward.
And I think
appreciate
people's
that.
positions are clear, so.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Motion to
Ms.
adjourn?
Crowe. Motion to adjourn. Do you have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Ms. Zito, I'm sorry.
I seconded it.
oh, she seconded the motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure.